as I went ahead and offered that, on one end, we're here to go ahead and commemorate that of Black History Month. We're here to acknowledge integral elements on campus and within our community, integral elements such as that of diversity, inclusion, and unity, right? And with that in mind, as a professor of political science, as a member of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, it was my goal to create a collaborative event with not only the College of Arts and Sciences, with not only that of the May Center, but also that of the President's Commission on Equity. And in doing so, I wanted to go ahead and bring about this particular individual and activist and journalist and author that is Kevin Powell. In providing a bit of an introduction about Mr. Powell, I offered, he is an author of many books. He is that of a poet. He has produced many publications, that of Rolling Stone, Vibe Magazine, that of Essence Magazine as well. And overall, he has that of a very unique voice that I believe to be something that could enlighten our student body in today's time that is very much needing that unique voice, right? So with that in mind, I went ahead and brought about this particular presentation, of course, in highlighting this presentation that Mr. Powell's going to go ahead and provide you all, that is titled, Why Latinx Lives Matter to This African American. So I thank you all for joining us today. Okay, those of y'all who are in my classes particularly, this is an extra credit opportunity. So I'm just going to remind you all to take either mental note or actual note concerning what you're receiving from this presentation, core aspects of what he is presenting to you all. And overall, I hope all of you do gain from this presentation that Mr. Powell is providing us. I thank you, Mr. Powell, for coming in today. He wasn't able to join us in person, so he is providing that of a Zoom presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and give him the floor. And thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Powell.
Thank you. Was that Ms. Lugo who was just speaking?
Yes, that is.
Hey, thank you so much. I want to thank Ms. Selena Lugo first and foremost for putting this together, for inviting me, for the entire Texas A&M San Antonio campus, for making this possible. It's really my honor and pleasure. I thank God for this opportunity. I thank all of you. And I just want to shout out all the students. I see you there, just waving at y'all. Can y'all see me? You can see me well? All right, I'm actually from New York City, but I live in Ohio. I'm in Ohio right now. I'm in Ohio right now. Just literally got off a previous talk, but I'm really excited about this conversation. I've been really looking forward to it. And just thank you from the bottom of my heart. Let me say first and foremost, I've been to Texas many, many times, including San Antonio. And I'm really sorry that I can't be there in person. Unfortunately, as you all know, this pandemic has done a number on all of our lives. And sadly, a lot of us, myself included, have lost quite a few people. So I'm just praying for you and your families. What I want to do is talk a little bit. I do not like it when speakers just talk, and you never get to hear the voices of the people in the audience. So it's important to me to hear from you all as well. Is that cool? Can we just nod our heads or make some noise? Is that cool? Yeah. All right. Looks like y'all are eating. Are you having lunch?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Yo tengo mucho hambre. I need some food right after this. So first and foremost, Black History Month, because I was asked to talk about it, but I am going to talk about the topic, why Latinx lives matter to this African American. Because, as Mrs. Lugo and I were talking about a topic, I said to myself, it's important for me as someone who has had a profound love and a lifelong love for the Latinx community to just say that very directly, But before I get into that, I want to say this, Black History Month, was created by someone named Carter G. Woodson back in 1926 when it was called Negro History Week. And Carter G. Woodson was someone who went to high school and didn't graduate from high school until he was in his 20s, until he was 20 something. He was very poor. He worked and he went to school at the same time. And he often had to study late at night with a kerosene lamp. And he actually went on to get a PhD and became known as the father of Black history. He wrote many, many scholarly books and articles. His most famous book was called The Miseducation of the Negro. If anyone is a music lover, the way I'm a music lover, you know that there's a singer named Lauryn Hill who had an album that won 8 Grammys, back in the late 1990s called The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Well, that's where she got the title from, Carter G. Woodson's The Miseducation of the Negro. We know, or we should know, that Carter G. Woodson created Negro History Week in 1926 He picked February because two people very, very integral to Black history were born in February. One was Frederick Douglass, who was a Black man who was literally born into slavery. And during his time as a enslaved human being, he actually taught himself how to read and write, and also got some kids to teach him how to read and write, some young white kids in the area, by giving them food. It's all his autobiography, the narrative of the life and times of Frederick Douglass, and he eventually escaped from slavery and became one of the most outspoken critics of slavery and one of the biggest abolitionists that we ever saw. The other person born in February was Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president of the United States, who has been credited by some with freeing Black people from slavery. But I know after our years of being told that and reading about it, that actually not is fully the case. And I think y'all know there in Texas, there's something called Juneteenth, where there were Black folks who didn't even know that they had been freed, for about 2 years. And so, but at the time that he created Negro History Week, Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln were massive, massive figures in Black American life, which is why February was picked for Negro History Week. And we know by the 1970s, by 1976, because of the great civil rights movement that happened in the 1950s and 1960s in this country, we as Black people went from being called Negro or colored to Black, and Negro History Week became a full month in 1976. So that's important, just like it's important for me to know that Hispanic Heritage Month is half of September, the second half of September, and the first half of October. Just like it's important for me to know that Women's History Month is happening starting next week. Just like it's important for me to know about all different types of people. Why does it matter? It matters because, Black history is American history. Latinx history is American history. Women's history is American history. And when we don't know these things, we don't know the basics about ourselves or different types of people, in my humble opinion, we don't really know the world that we live in. We don't know this country we live in. We don't know the state that we live in. A little background about me that Ms. Lugo alluded to. I was born and raised in Jersey City. I've lived in New York for a long time, pretty much most of my adult life, but I was born and raised in Jersey City, New Jersey. My mother, who raised me by herself, she was a single mother, was from South Carolina, the American South. And she and my father they never married. My father was much older than my mother. And unfortunately, he was one of the folks that ends up being an irresponsible father. We know there are good fathers out there. I simply didn't have one. I only saw him 2 or 3 times until I was about 8 years old. And then he just basically said to my mother, "You lied to me," and cut us off. And that's how I ended up just being raised by my mother. I'm an only child. I grew up tremendously poor. I've always said as an adult that poverty is a form of violence. And when I say poor, I mean, I was lucky if I had, outfits for school for the spring and fall seasons, and then some pants that were a little bit warmer for the winter seasons. I had one pair of shoes, one pair of sneakers. When I was growing up, if you ran holes into your shoes and sneakers, you just had to put cardboard or a newspaper at the bottom of your sneakers. You still had to go to school. And I grew up in the Northeast where there was snow, just like there's snow now. I know Texas and other parts of the country get it now, but growing up, there wasn't like it wasn't like that back then. The Northeast was brutal to be poor and not have decent things to wear in the wintertime. We struggled tremendously. My mother did the best that she could. We were on welfare, like a lot of us, unfortunately, have to be on welfare. It wasn't because we were trying to hustle the government, we were trying to cheat the government, anything like that. We simply needed the help. We needed the food stamps, which we now call food stamps or EBT cards. We needed any kind of aid that we could get because it felt like a lot of times we were just always on the verge of not having anything. And I mean that, Ms. Lugo introduced me and said that all the things that I do. Yep, I've written 15 books. Yep, I've traveled this country extensively. I've been to all 50 states in America. I've traveled to 5 of the 7 continents, but I didn't even get on a plane until I was 24. We just had no money. We had nothing. And the only reason why I was able to go to college was because of a financial aid package and because of programs that were created during the civil rights movement that made it possible for, honestly, poor, Black, and Latinx kids to go to college. That's how I got to college. And now let me say this, because this is important to say, there's no shame in being poor. It is what it is. The shame is not doing anything with your life in spite of your circumstances. And one thing I got from my mother was that you gotta take your life seriously. You gotta take your education seriously, especially as a person of color. I need to say this to you all. We are not minorities. We are not minorities. We are not minorities. We are people of color, if you happen to be Black or Latinx or Asian or Native American, indigenous people. We are not minorities. That's one of the worst words I've ever heard in my life. It was created during the 1960s, but I'm saying to y'all, reject that terminology. People of color, or claim who you are. When I was growing up in Jersey City, which is right next door to New York City, literally across the river, I grew up with folks in a neighborhood that they call now the ghetto or the hood. It was Black and Latinx people. That was us. It was us living together. And it was not unusual for us to meet people who might have had names like Malik Rodriguez or Maria Jackson, people who might have been half Black, half Latinx. When I was growing up, most of the folks who were Latinx were either Cuban or Puerto Rican, mostly Puerto Ricans. There was a small pocket of Cubans in the area as well. Over time, people who started coming to the area also happened to include folks who were Dominican, Panamanian, El Salvadorian, Guatemalan, Mexican, all different parts of Latin America. I can tell you from a very early age, as a Black boy, as an African-American boy, I fell in love instantly with Latinx culture. It started in a couple of ways. One, just living in the same community. And I wasn't closed-minded. Even as a child, I was very open-minded. So I would hear El Español, folks speaking Spanish. And I paid attention. And I was like, wow, I want to be able to do what I'm hearing. And I would start repeating things. Uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco, seis, siete. I would start counting in Spanish. I would start doing the alphabet. A, B, C, D, E. I would say these things. Hola, ¿cómo estás? ¿Qué tal? ¿Qué va? ¿Qué vaso? I would pick up words. I was wondering, like, when I heard people say things like the names of foods, I was interested in it. I heard the music that was being played. I saw the cultural love amongst the community, and it had an impact on me, particularly because in my immediate family, my mother and I didn't express love in a certain kind of way. And so when I saw it in other places, like in the Latinx community or certain parts of the Latinx community, it had a big impact on me. I also felt very early on, we are all in this together. We're all in this together. It doesn't matter that you might come from Latin America. I may come from my mother may come from the American South. We're all struggling and trying to figure this thing out together. And so that was the beginning of my relationship with the Latinx community, but it also happened to parallel something that was happening with young people at that time. It was the explosion, the creation, the birth of hip hop. Who created hip hop? Poor Black people and poor Latinx people in a place called New York City, the whole metropolitan New York City area. You couldn't even talk about hip hop. There's no way I can talk about hip hop, the growth of it, the birth of it, any of it, without talking about the Latinx community, who were some of the great graffiti writers and breakdancers, B-boys and B-girls ever, Latinx folks. You know what I'm saying? Who are some of the early DJ and MC pioneers? Latinx folks. This is not just New York City, but there was also a parallel energy that was happening on the West Coast. And so that helped to intensify my great love and connection and solidarity with the Latinx community. And as I got to be a college student, become an adult, and I studied political science in college, I was a poli-sci major because at the time I thought I was going to go to law school. But I ended up becoming a student leader and realized that my real passion at that time was being a writer. My knowledge base started to expand. And I was like, okay, it's not enough to just say, Kev, you love Puerto Rican culture, you love Chicano culture, but what is happening in these countries? What is happening in these countries that's important to you as a Black person in America? And I started paying attention in a different way as I started hearing things on the news and things were being said about people who were Salvadorian or Mexican, et cetera. And what I remember thinking to myself, the same kind of hostile, racist things that have been said about Black people are being said about Latinx people, the same exact things. And so I always would gravitate towards folks who were Chicano or Salvadorian or Puerto Rican or Dominican and say, I really want to understand, from your perspective, what is happening here, because the news is saying one thing or the media is saying one thing, but I'm feeling something very different here. And so what I'm talking about is how to be an ally, honestly, and unfortunately, I realized that I'm not the norm for a lot of Black people in this country, in America, and I know there are Black folks who definitely have a deep love for Latinx culture and history and the people like I do, but a lot of us, unfortunately, and I think it goes both ways, just like in the Latinx community, there's this tension, there's this like Olympics oppression, who's got it worse, who's the biggest so-called minority group or people of color, how I feel about the word minority, but y'all know what I'm talking about. And what I tried to express to people over and over again, which is why Ms. Lugo asked me to speak here, is that when I think about voting rights, for example, I don't just think about Black people. I think about Latinx people in places like Texas. When I think about immigration rights, I'm not just thinking about Black folks in New York who might be West Indian or from Africa, but I'm also thinking about folks from Latin America. When I think about children being put in cages at the border, that is impactful to me as knowing about the history of my own people being put in cages during slavery and after slavery. When I think about, how people are told to go back to where they came from, well, guess how many times in my lifetime I've been told, someone who was born in America, to go back to Africa, And so it's important to say that there's so many parallels and similarities between the two communities. And we know, just like in the Black American community, there's a diversity of hair textures and skin colors, all of that. We know the same thing exists in the Latinx community. One of my greatest friends is a brother named Antonio Tejarino. He's the president of the Hispanic Heritage Foundation out of Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. He and I talk all the time about Latinx Black unity, Black brown unity, why we need to work together, why we must work together, because think about if the two communities consistently could do that, and we have examples of it in our history, like the Black Panther Party and the Young Lords in New York City and around the country in the late 1960s into the 1970s. We have examples of it. If we can work together, imagine, especially when, as Ms. Lugo and I were talking about before this program, these attacks, these racist attacks on voting rights, it's a way to disempower both our communities, not just the Latinx community, not just the Black community, both our communities. I did a cover story for the Washington Post magazine on Stacey Abrams about a year or two ago. And she talked about how even in the state of Georgia, because of the growing population of the Latinx community, it made it possible for her to put together this coalition of Black and brown folks that may very likely, if she's running for governor now, will help get her elected. And hopefully, if it happens, then we can start to deal in places like Georgia with these ridiculous and racist anti-voting rights laws that are in place. Why does it matter? When we think about something like critical race theory, and the attacks on critical race theory, it ain't just about Black people and Black history being taught in the school system. Well, guess what, you all? When I was growing up, I didn't learn anything about Mexican culture. I didn't learn anything about Guatemalan culture. I didn't learn anything about Salvadorian culture. I didn't learn anything about Nicaraguan culture. I didn't learn anything about Puerto Rican, Dominican, Panamanian culture. I learned nothing about Latinx history either. That's equally important, And so when we see these attacks on what can be taught and not taught in schools, what books can and cannot be used, what books are being banned, that's saying that someone, Latinx person, someone Black person, thinks that you, Latinx person, you, Black person, your history, your culture, your way of seeing things is a threat to their power, to their privilege, to their existence. And they will do everything they can legally or creating new laws to try to block stuff. And so the question becomes, what do we do? And I'm saying first and foremost, as I say in every presentation, we got to know who we are. We got to be proud of who we are. If someone says to you, you shouldn't speak Spanish at all, you say, I'm going to speak Spanish for the rest of my life because Spanish is beautiful poetry. I'm saying to you all as a writer, as someone who's authored 15 books, there's no way I could be the writer that I am without Black writers who've impacted me, but also Latinx writers with names like Pablo Neruda, like Garcia Lorca, because I understand that Latinx writers are some of the greatest writers that have ever existed in world literary history, period. But we got to be proud of who we are. No matter who we are, we got to be proud of it. I say that to Black folks and Latinx folks all the time. Be proud of your language, be proud of your food, be proud of your music, be proud of how you dress, be proud of everything that says you are you. I say to Black folks all the time what I'll say to the Latinx community there at the school. Don't try to erase yourself to make someone else feel comfortable. You are supposed to be here. You're supposed to be in Texas. You're supposed to be at this college. You're supposed to be on this earth at this time. Because every single one of you is a genius, is a genius, is a genius. Every single one of you is beautiful and powerful, period. And that goes for all people, but right now I'm talking about Latinx and Black folks. What do we need to do? Don't get caught up in the divide and conquer stuff. Don't get caught up in divide and conquer stuff. If you hear a Latinx person or a Black person dissing the one group, that the other group, be like, nah, we can't support that. That's unacceptable. You know, just like Ms. Lugo and I came together to put together this program as a Latinx person, a Black person, as allies, that's what we need to be doing on a consistent basis. What do we need to do? Stop and challenge the stereotypes. I mean, you know, I don't need to say, I'm not going to say his name, but we know the last person that was a president of the United States, if you listen to his insane racism, you would think that all Latinx people are nothing but all kinds of negative things, just like what's been said about Black people historically. And we know that's a lie. Everywhere I've gone in this country, and again, I've been all over this country, I've seen huge Latinx communities, I've seen small Latinx communities, I see family-centered people, I see workers, I see folks who are trying to make things happen, even in poverty, even in poverty. Why is all this important? Because of what is at stake in this country, which speaks to your work, Ms. Lugo, and I'm really eager to get to the questions and the dialogue in a second. Politically, you know, there are forces in this country are doing everything they can to turn the country backwards to pre-civil rights America. For the sake of argument, the civil rights movement was from 1955 to 1968. For the sake of argument, 13 years, that core period. We know things like the Civil Rights Bill was passed in 1964, the Voting Rights Act was passed in 65. What we know as well is that there were folks, the moment that the ink was dry, that have said, no, we don't want this to happen. We don't want this country to change. We want to take our country back. We want to make America great again, but not for everybody, just for us. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And so this is not something that's new, some new phenomenon that just happened with this last president, or that may happen, is happening this year, that's happening with the Supreme Court, that will happen in the midterm elections, that will happen in 2024 with the next presidential election. This has been going on for, at least the last 50, 60 years. And so you all have to make sure you not only protect your right to vote, but participate in it and support people who actually support your community. Don't get blinded by self-hatred, allowing you to pit yourself against your own community just to support some folks who really don't care about you at all. Make sure that you actually take leadership very seriously and are out there in every way possible. It's not just voting, but raising the consciousness, the awareness of what we call in these times, the wokeness of people in your community, so they understand if we vote as a block, if we come together, we are very powerful as a community. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. What do we need to do? The education front is critical. Y'all got to graduate, you know, at least make an effort to become as educated as possible and share that knowledge with people. Share that knowledge with people. I love being Latinx. Say it unapologetically. I know what my community has contributed to the state of Texas and to this country and to this world. I am here and I'm not going anywhere, period. And what does that mean for us who have to fight this good fight, like Ms. Lugo, like myself? We need y'all to join us, honestly. You know, the work that Ms. Lugo's doing, you know, deconstructing, breaking down things like the American Constitution. We need to know these things. We need to understand these things, because this is about our future, but also about where we are right now. And these are very, very deep times that we're in, you know. I just did a corporate talk before this, Ms. Lugo, where I talked about all the fear, all the hatred, all the violence out there. And I'm going to say it to y'all straight up. Just like I felt pain when a white supremacist walked into a Black church in South Carolina and blew away those Black folks who invited him in, I felt the same pain when similar type of thing happened to a mostly Latinx shopping center there in Texas. In other words, we're all in this together, and we got to figure this out together. So I want to thank y'all, and I want to say I love y'all and I appreciate y'all, and I'm open and willing and eager to hear your comments and your questions. But I just wanted to kind of give you a framework of where I'm at and why it's important to me to have these kind of conversations, not just with the Black community, but also with the Latinx community. Thank you.
Right. So I know you can't see me, Mr. Powell. The camera is recorded.
Kevin.
Kevin, yeah. Kevin. I do thank you for that illuminating and enriching presentation. You know, as I mentioned to you previously, I thought, you know, having you speak to our students was going to be something profound and enriching, you know, to have your very unique perspective presented to everybody, you know, as you have done just that right now. Now, at this point in time, everybody, you know, we did want to go ahead and provide about, you know, 15 or 20 minutes of, you know, question and answer portion. So, you know, those of us that may have inquiries, do we have questions for Kevin Powell at this point in time? Of course, you know, one of my own students over here. I'm gonna go ahead and point the camera. I think it's this way. Yeah,
Hey, y'all, what's up?
Hi, Kevin. How you doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
All right. I was just wanted to ask before I came in, you know, with Black History Month and all that, to have remembrance and honor even, I just want to know what Black History Month means to you specifically.
What it means to me? It means making up for what has been excluded from my education. You know, how is it that I can go to school K through 12, kindergarten through the 12th grade, and not see myself in history books and science books and math books and any books? That's to me, that's called educational malpractice. It's not just about Black people. It's like, you know, how does it happen to Latinx folks or Jewish folks or Italian folks or Asian folks or indigenous people, Native American folks? How does it happen to women? You know, we go right from this to Women's History Month. Why are these months important? Because they are a way to address the egregious omission of people from our education. That's why it matters. It shouldn't just matter to me. It should matter to all of us. You know, I mean, be honest about it. Raise your hands if you never heard of Carter G. Woodson before today. Carter G. Woodson, the father of Black History Month. See what I mean? That's the problem right there. That's the problem right there. And you know what I say to people? How do you call yourself an American, no matter what your identity or identities are? And many folks don't even know basic American history, like know nothing. But then I can go overseas to places like Japan, other parts of the world where I've been, and not only do they know their history, but they know American history better than most of us. That's enough for me to say I got to keep learning for the rest of my life. I need to be a student for the rest of my life. You know, if we came to college to make money, Bill Gates, college dropout. Beyonce never went to college. Jay-Z never went to college. Steve Jobs, who created Apple, this Apple computer that I'm on, my iPhone is sitting right next to me, college dropout. College, yeah, I don't want to be poor. You heard my story. I come from horrific poverty. I don't want to be poor. But at the same time, I realized you can have all the money in the world, but be poor in your brain because you don't know basic things, you know? So why does it matter to me? All of it matters to me. Hispanic Heritage Month matters to me. Women's History Month matters to me. Pride matters to me. All of it matters to me because I want to learn about all different types of people because I think it makes me a better human being. That's why.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. We have another question in the
Thank
back. I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear her, but I'll try to translate that for you. Go ahead.
Yeah.
What was the specific moment when you changed your career from wanting to be a lawyer to a writer? Like, was there a specific moment that made you realize that you wanted to write instead of becoming?
Well, I heard the question. Why did I go from wanting to be a lawyer to a writer? Because unfortunately, a lot of our parents, and I think, you know, folks here will understand what I'm saying, especially if you're a first generation college student the way I was, you know, a lot of our parents put pressure on us to go for jobs or careers that'll make money because we were poor. And my mother was like, be a lawyer, a doctor. And I didn't want to be a doctor. So I figured I could be a lawyer, but I didn't even like, I mean, political science is a fine major. I no disrespect to political science, poli-sci, but I was more interested in history. I was more interested in English. I was more interested in philosophy. And I knew that I wanted to be a writer. And at a certain point, I had to say, you know what? I can't do what my mother wants me to do. All that pressure she's putting on me. I gotta do what makes me happy. And I'm an artist. I'm a writer. I'm a creative. And that's what I wanted to be. And I just went for it. My mother thought I was crazy. But all these years later, my mother brags about it. She says, oh, my son's a writer. He writes books. So I believe that, and this is for all the students out there, you gotta do what's best for you. You know, what's the point of having a job that you hate? What's the point of having a career that you hate? I can say every day that I get up, I love what I do. You know, I think Ms. Lugo, based on the passion that I've gotten from you and us talking these last couple of weeks, you clearly love being an educator. Am I right?
It's very true. Yes, absolutely.
That's what I'm talking about. So that's why I went from lawyer to writer. I was like, And there's nothing wrong with being a lawyer. I just don't want to be a lawyer. I'm good with that. I'd rather hire a lawyer.
Thank you for that question. Fantastic. Does anybody else have a question, Mr. Powell? Okay.
I do, but the chat is kind of muted.
Yeah, can we unmute the chat? Can we just say,
Yeah.
can we put the chat back on?
Yeah, 1 second.
Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, the chat is now enabled. Thank you for the reminder. So if you want to go ahead and insert a question in the chat box, you all are able to now do so. We'll go ahead and give a second.
Okay, thank you. I'll just speak mine since I'm already talking.
Okay, go ahead.
When you said that people are like banning books, what can we do besides voting to get them to like not do this or like not or like restrict our education?
Buy the books, encourage people, use social media as a tool to spread the word that these are things that we should be able to read, we should be able to watch, we should be able to study. I mean, this is where oppression becomes real in a different kind of way when you start seeing things being banned, when people saying we can't have conversations. Now think about it. We're taught when we're growing up that democracy means that all voices matter, but then you see books being banned. That says that all voices don't matter. See my point? And so you all, we collectively, multicultural, multi-generational, have to come together and say, hey, this is not acceptable. You know, I mean, think about it. Toni Morrison is one of our greatest writers in American literary history, not just Black writers, but just period. Some of her books have been banned nonstop since the 1970s. This is insane. You know, this is someone who's won a Nobel Prize for literature. I mean, she was an incredible writer. How are you banning her? But you know, I mean, Shakespeare, who I love Shakespeare, but no one's banning Shakespeare. But when I read Shakespeare, I'm like, there's drugs, there's violence, there's alcohol, there's adultery, there's all kinds of stuff going on. Shakespeare is cool, but you want to ban certain hip hop songs, as I've seen since the 1990s, certain hip hop albums, you want to ban certain kinds of books because you don't like what's being said. That's a double standard to me.
I'm going to go ahead and insert in reference to the question, you know, just to add, your question was, what can you all do in reference to books being banned? I think this is also a tie-in, Kevin, to your point on critical race theory, you know, because this is an issue that's taking place in many states. You have a lot of state legislation, such as even in Texas. So it's a process is happening at the state level. So, you know, if your question is what can be done, what can you do? You know, for those of us that take classes of mine, such as in state government, even federal government, but let's say state government, you know, it's basically what I discuss with you all in such classes. That is, it is about awareness, it is about engagement, and you know, even as Kevin said, it's about participation. You know,
Yes.
It is about taking part. It is about participation to the extent that, let's say, for instance, we have voting taking, right, Aaron? We have our Mays Center facilitator here right with us assisting in this process to the right over here. And we have voting taking place on campus at the Mays Center for the Texas primaries. We're gonna have general elections taking place soon enough for that statewide elections. And we have, yeah, I think, when was that?
It's on Tuesday.
On Tuesday. And so with that said, when you have a lot of state legislation that's working to ban that of, you know, books of that provide diversity in thought across the board. Let's say, for instance, K through 12, you know, kinder through 12th grade. But let's say, for instance, that may potentially start banning diversity in thought in higher education in classes such as ours, you know,
That's
which
right.
is potentially what's going to be taking place rather soon, which is what's, you know, really what I just saw in the news the other day. If that's something that startles you, then again, that really just takes us back to the point of, if you're discomforted by such information, then that should be instigation to participate and engage, but first and foremost, to be aware. And
Yes.
furthermore, get the word out and, you know, participate, you know, be a part of the electorate, vote, right? So that's what I go ahead and add in reference to that.
I want to say amen and a women to what Ms. Lugo just said. You have to get involved. Look, when I went to college as an 18-year-old, I wasn't woke. I wasn't woke. Nah, not even close. But there were things that were happening in the world around me that lit a fire under me. And I realized that I was ignorant about a lot of stuff. So one, I had a responsibility to read and to begin to take control of my education. You know what I mean by that? Yeah, I was a strong student, K through 12. I was ignorant about myself, about my community, about this country, about this world. That's just a fact, right? And so I was like, I got to redirect that. I got to redirect that. And then I also have to get involved. I have to do something, to Ms. Lugo's point. I have to be a leader, you know? And what is a leader? Let's write this down, y'all. What is a leader? A leader is someone, let's just say they, who changes the direction of the conversation. That's a leader. Leaders create a new word or vocabulary. Don't keep saying the same stuff we've heard over and over again. Leaders get involved in whatever community they are at. You know, they're in San Antonio on your campus, wherever they are from, you do something to affect change, to move the needle in your community. Voting rights, immigration rights, abortion rights, fighting for critical race theory, making sure certain things don't get banned in your community. You have to be engaged, as Ms. Lugo just said very eloquently. What does a leader do? You create an organization or institution or business that supports the community that you claim to be representing. You create an organization, institution, business, something that represents and supports the community that you represent or claim to represent. Leaders have to hashtag read, study, travel. Leaders have to hashtag read, study, travel for the rest of your lives. We have enough ignorant leaders out there in the world. Some of them are called elected officials. Some of them are called preachers or pastors or ministers. I'm keeping it 1,000 with you right now. I'm saying to you all, no disrespect to those folks. I've been someone who's run for office. I go to a church. I belong to a church. But you can't be a leader if you don't know what you're talking about. One of the things that impressed me the most about Ms. Lugo is her knowledge of all these things that have to do with our basic rights as citizens in this country, because she hashtag reads, study, travels. This is her passion. You feel what I'm saying? And so we need people out there, not just protesting and marching, which I've done many times, building takeovers, all kinds, stopping traffic, all of that. Anybody can do that. But what a leader needs to be able to do is articulate, speak, this is what the problem or problems are, and this is what we're going to do about it. One of my greatest sheroes in the country is right there in Texas, a Latinx woman, an elder named Sister Norma. Look her up if you don't know who I'm talking about, Sister Norma. She has been fighting on the front lines for years. No one, she doesn't care about fame, celebrity, money, any of that, but fighting for basic immigrant rights. Sister Norma. That's what I'm talking about. That's a leader. I will do whatever it takes to help my community.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. We have another question in the back. All right, try to speak up. Go ahead.
I was wondering if you could talk about how you've been able to like jump into different fields and like do different careers. Because a lot of our students here are wondering like, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this that I want to do, but I don't know how to do that?
Did you hear that, Kevin?
No, if you can repeat the question, please.
Yeah, so what he said was, what insight do you have? You're a pretty multifaceted person. You're an author, obviously you're into journalism, you're a poet, you're pretty multifaceted in your career. So what advice do you have for students that, have these different interests, but may not be able to hone in on them transferring out of college? What's your advice for, I guess, just being able to apply yourself into one and channel further into another mode, whether journalism, in your case, poetry? What's your advice? And
well, that's a great question. At the end of the day, if we get rid of my resume, bio, whatever it's called, CV, I'm a writer and I'm an activist. This is the two things that I said I wanted to be when I was 18 years old, when I became woke, aware, conscious. That's what I still am. I'm a writer and I'm an activist, and it's just taking on different forms. You know what I mean? And so I don't see it as a career. I don't even use the career. Obviously, I want to make a living, and so I have figured out a way to make a living on my terms as a writer, as an activist, and as a speaker, as you know, Ms. Lugo, those three things. And they just go in different directions. But at the end of the day, that's the core of who I am. It's a life with many chapters. It's not a career. I'm not a careerist, and no offense to anyone, but it's my life. And my life is about service, helping people. My life is about writing and telling stories that I feel often are not heard. And my life is about, speaking with and listening to people, just like we're doing right now. That's what it is for me. And those three things make me incredibly happy. And I've decided at different points in my life, I gotta embrace happiness. I gotta love what I actually do. And these things make me happier than anything else in the world. That's the truth.
All right. Thank you for that. Anybody else have a question for for Kevin? All right, we have another question back here. Go ahead.
You were talking about how like the Latinx community and the Black community should be coming together and therefore we become stronger. How do you deal with the opposition of that? Because a lot of people are reluctant to come together in that sense.
I challenge people. Like if I hear Black American folks saying ignorant stuff, hateful stuff about Latinx folks, I push back on it. Like, how, I don't even want to repeat some of the stuff that I've heard, but, Black Americans are no different than most Americans, where we think that the Latinx community is just a monolith. Like, everyone's Puerto Rican or everyone's Mexican. No, everyone's not Mexican. Not everyone's Puerto Rican. There's all different types of folks that make up Latinx community. And so I think that part of the work is that we have to be interrupters. We got to interrupt hate. We got to interrupt ignorance. We got to interrupt fear. But we can't do that if we don't hashtag, read, study, travel, are able to come prepared with information that's going to challenge people on their backwardsness, on their hate, on their fear. That's how I feel. If I can go back for a second, Ms. Lugo, when we're talking about life or life journey or career, I call it life journey, not a career. But I will say this, we should make a living at what we love to do. And the money will come. If you put all your energy into what you really love, I guarantee you the money will come. You know what I mean? And I just think it's not effective to try to do everything all over the place. You got to focus. Well, what do you actually know how to do well? You know what I'm saying? It comes back to that for me over and over again. What do I actually know how to do well? And having the humility to say, well, let me get someone else to do this because I'm not good at this. I'm just okay at this.
I'd go ahead and, back up what Kevin said in reference to your question, because that's something I come across also, not just professionally, but personally. So I do, and I agree to the extent that it is about, having those conversations that for some are uncomfortable, but it's about awareness, it's about contextualizing history for people and also putting, into context and into perspective where we are presently, because our history also dictates where we are in current time as well. It's very indicative of where we stand in current time. So, that's why I also, to rather legitimate extent, I integrate that into all aspects of my class. I don't just discuss terminology in terms of, current policy. I always give that historical context so that we always understand, extensively what this includes, what this personifies, and where it, brings us back from. So I think, like I said, it's all about having those conversations. And like you said, yeah, very much interrupting people's narratives within their minds, because sometimes people don't have any sorts of understanding from their backgrounds, from where they come from, and a place like a university. And I can say that from my own upbringing, I didn't have an extensive background other than what I grew up with. And I know that, and I'm a product of the A&M system myself, from that of Laredo, even further south. And I know that coming from the A&M system and coming from existing in that of a very, very multicultural campus, and having professors from all over the world, and just having this environment where you do have diversity in thought presented to you, not being told how to think, but just having these class processes and information in which you're presented with different ideas, different perspectives, different points and purposes in time, and so on and so forth. That in of itself is illuminating, and that can be so helpful. And then furthermore, taking that conversation out of class and continuing the conversations. And that is extremely productive. Just continue that. So that's what I think.
Right. Thank you. That's very powerful. Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else, Ms. Lugo?
Yeah. Does anybody else have a question, comment? Kevin?
Your student fees pay for speakers to come. Please ask questions. Please.
All right, we have another question right up front. Go ahead.
How you doing, Kevin? Thank you for spending your time with us.
Thank you for having me.
Regardless of our fees paying for you. No, just a quick question. So if you're in a new environment, correct, and you're surrounded by old heads, or so have you, old school generation people that kind of have a mindset and a not stuck in their ways, but they're set on their mindset. How would you go about setting, because you did say to be a good leader, a great leader, to have and create a new vocabulary. How would you begin that process? What would be your first steps on creating that new vocabulary? And also, because I know you did say getting involved in any way you can, what would be like that number one step that you would take to get that started?
First of all, I want one of those hoodies, y'all. That's a dope hoodie you got on. I want to represent A&M too, y'all. San Antonio, River Walk, all of that. You know what I'm saying? Listen, I think that, I mean, when we look, what's your name, please?
Eric Leon.
Eric Leon. Eric, if you look at the history of America and the history of the world, it's always been young people have fueled any kind of change. I mean, just think about a couple, almost 2 years ago now, when George Floyd got kneed to death in Minnesota for those 9 minutes plus on videotape. It wasn't just Black folks out there. It was Latinx folks, white folks, Asian folks, indigenous folks. It wasn't just America. It was all over the world. Most of the folks who were out there were under 30, under 40 years of age. It was incredible. It was beautiful. You know what I mean? People seem to forget that Dr. King didn't even make it to 40 years of age. He was 39 when he got killed. Malcolm X, 39 years old. They were young people. And so number one, I think, yeah, I'll say to y'all what I say everywhere I go, Eric. Young people are not future leaders, not tomorrow leaders. Y'all are leaders right now, like right now, like right now. All I was saying, here's some things that you need to have in your leadership toolbox. Can y'all write that down? What I need to have in my leadership toolbox. And what I'm saying is it's got to come from you. You know what I mean? I can't tell you what the words should be. You got to say, yo, this is what the new word is. We're not going to say civil rights anymore. We're going to call it this. You know what I mean? We're not going to say immigration rights anymore. We're going to call it this. You feel what I'm saying? Because y'all are dope. If you're born in the late 1990s or the 1990s to 2000s, you have a different perspective on the world if someone who's born in the 60s, 70s, or 80s. You feel what I'm saying? And your voice is just as important as my voice. My voice ain't more important than yours. What we can do is come together where we have an exchange. Kev, here's what I know. And then I'm like, Eric, this is what I know. How can we bring this together? But I have just as much responsibility to listen to how you move. Like what do young people listen to today? How do you dress? How do you wear things? You know, why do tattoos matter to you? Why do piercing matter to you? What does that mean to you? You know, why is social media so important to you? Why is TikTok? Why did TikTok blow up? You know what I'm saying? The worst thing I can do as an older person, or some of y'all say old heads, is to tune you out completely. That's mad corny. That's hella corny. That's disrespectful to y'all. And the same thing happened to me when I was a youth. You feel what I'm saying? And so we just said, screw the old cats who don't get it. We're just going to create our own thing. That's what we did. We created our own organizations, our own movement, our own energy. We created hip hop and we still got it. It's still a young people's game. Even as some of us have gotten older in hip hop, like Snoop and Dre at the Super Bowl halftime show, right? But that's still an energy, which is counter to what's been out there, you know? And so I can't tell you what the words are, what you should do exactly. But I think all I'm saying, Eric, and everyone, know what you're talking about. I'm going to say it again. The thing that has impressed me the most about Miss Lugo and the conversations we've had over the last couple of weeks, because she loves you all and she believes in you all, is how knowledgeable she is about the things that we need to be dealing with in the 21st century. And the worst thing we can do as folks who are supposed to be educated is not only not fail as leaders, but not, if you get out there, just be ill-equipped to be a leader. You don't even know how to speak about certain things. You know, I think, man, how many of y'all out there are multilingual? How many of y'all can speak English and Spanish? Just raise your hand. Make some noise if you're bilingual. Make some noise. Loud, 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 loud. First and foremost, do you, Eric and everyone out there, do you realize what a gift that is to be able to say, I can speak English and Spanish? That's a gift. That's a gift. That's in your leadership toolbox, number one. I'm bilingual. You know what I mean? But what else is a gift? How many are on social? Make some noise if you're on social media and you love social media. Make some noise.
All on social media.
Okay, how many of y'all got an email? How many of y'all got a cell phone? You feel I'm going with this? Well, guess what? Those things, like back in the day when I was coming up, Eric, we passed out flyers. The cell phone, social media, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, those are the new flyers. That's how you reach people. You feel what I'm saying? And so you all have things that we didn't even have 20 years ago, back in the 90s, y'all got access to. Early 2000s even, you know what I mean? And so My job is to say, hey, Eric, and everyone out there who's younger than me, here's where we came from up until where I came on the scene as a young person. Now, here's where you are. How do you take that? So you got to know the history. You got to know the history. You got to know the history, but then make sure you also able to articulate, here's what's happening now. This is how it's going to work. You know what I mean? You got to connect the two. So when I was a youth coming up, I had to know what happened before me, but then I was like, okay, that's cool, but here's what we're doing now. But I had a foundation to build on. That's what I'm saying. Like, we got to know where we came from. Like, it's I'll give you an example. How many of y'all watched the Super Bowl this weekend? The Super Bowl halftime show with Dre and Snoop and all those folks. You know what I thought, Miss Lugo, while I was watching it? I thought a lot of things. I thought a lot of things. I thought about gender issues. I thought about race issues. I also thought about the fact that lowrider culture was created by Latinx people, not Black Americans.
Good point.
You feel me?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But Eric and everyone else, I wouldn't know that if I didn't hashtag read, study, travel, if I never went to California, if I never spent time in the culture out there. You see what I'm saying? But then I got a job as a leader to say, hey, y'all, you can't keep saying hip hop was started by Black folks when Latinx folks are right there, right with Black folks.
Yeah.
See what I mean?
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and echo your point in reference to the question that you just went ahead and offered. I think what Kevin's trying to say, just to reiterate, is that you all have the tools.
Yeah.
Whatever you're looking for and what you want to do, you all have the tools in your arsenal, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's just about, just one foot in front of the other, and go ahead and make that first step. You have a voice, use it.
That's right.
It's really
That's
just about
right.
that first step, finding your way forward. If
So-
that's what you want to go ahead and do, lead.
Eric and everyone out there, when I started college, my self-esteem, write this down, y'all, self-esteem. This is so important. It was so low. I was one of those people who couldn't even make eye contact with people. No shame. It's just who I was at the time. I didn't talk because I didn't think my voice mattered. I would often make myself invisible. You know what I mean? And what I got from my college experience was that, your voice matters. You deserve to be here. You're supposed to be here. You're important. You're as important as anyone else, not in the egotistical sense, but you're supposed to be here. And then once I began to realize that, to Ms. Lugo's point, okay, what can I do to make sure that other people are here, who look like me, who come from my community, and they have the same opportunities? What can I do to make sure we stay here? What can I do to make sure that we protect Black studies or Latinx studies, or Chicano studies? You feel what I'm saying? What can I do to protect my Latinx organization or my Black organization? And if people say crazy stuff like, well, that's racist, you got a Latinx college or a Black college or a Black this or Hispanic Latinx that. No, your response is because we hashtag read, study, travel. No, what's actually racist is creating a society that left me out in the first place. You feel me? That's how you flip it on people.
Good point. Anybody else have any questions? We have one more over here. Go ahead.
Yep.
Why did you use the term Latinx on your title? When I hear the term, I don't identify it or feel encouraged by it. I normally identify as Hispanic or Latino, but not as Latinx.
Did you hear that?
Can you repeat the question, Ms. Lugo?
He's asking why you refer to Latinos as Latinx. He says that he doesn't identify with it. He identifies as Hispanic or Latino. So he's just wondering why you use the term Latinx.
I use it because I'm also allied to the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, non-binary, non-gender conforming community. And many of the folks who are Latinx who also happen to be queer, quote unquote, have said that is a term they prefer because it does not masculinize and feminize who they are. It's just neutral. That's why. But I believe, to your question, everyone has a right to say whatever they want. I'll be honest with you, my mother refuses to say African American. She still says Black, or she even says colored, which is a throwback term from way back in the day. If you want to call yourself Hispanic or Latino or Latina, that's your prerogative. I can't tell people what to do. That's just the thing that I say based on what I have heard from folks who have also felt marginalized. Because let's not forget, y'all, while we may be Latinx and Black folks, even in our communities, women are discriminated against in our communities. The lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender community is discriminated against. Disabled folks are discriminated against. And it's not just the outside world that's hurting them and discriminating against them. It's also some of us inside these communities, Latinx and Black communities, that are hurting people because of our homophobia or our sex or our transphobia or our sexism, et cetera, or our ableism. So that's why I use the term. That's just me as an ally.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else have any other questions for Kevin? Another one over here. Go ahead. If you prefer. Yeah, he can see you better. Go ahead.
Hey.
So I am Hispanic and Black, and I was raised with the talk, and I was reminded constantly of the discrimination I may face in the future as I got older. So how do you feel about parents who might use that fear to push their point across to their kids?
Ms. Lugo, can you repeat the question, please?
You said that you were raised, you're a mixed race, right? You're both African American and Hispanic, and that your parents that they instill that fear in you that you're going to face discrimination out in the world. So be cautious as you move around. So your question is that what would you say to young people who have been raised with that fear instilled in them? What would you say to that?
Oh my God, I was raised with fear. I mean, my gosh. And I think we need to understand, this is one of the reasons why I think, the Latinx and Black communities have a lot of parallels, because it's very similar story. This will happen to you if you go to this space. This will happen to you that space. I feel like I was scared of everything growing up. And my mother, first of all, let's bring it back a second. Like, when we talk about Latinx folks and Black folks specifically, think about our histories and what we've had to deal with, the kind of hatred, violence, fear we've had to deal with, people saying crazy stuff to us, people making up stuff about us, all the stereotypes, et cetera. So I think when we have a parent or parents saying they're really trying to protect us the best way they know how, they're doing what they know best. And so I try to give my mother, I've had to over time learn to give my mother grace with that. Like, my mom did the best that she could with the education that she had. I'm not just talking about formal education in school, but what she knew about the world, based on who she was. And she was simply passing along to me, this is how you need to be safe. And why wouldn't she do that when there's a whole history in the Black community, for example, of Black men being hung from trees in places like Texas, for example, and South Carolina, where my family comes from. And why would she do that when you can just turn on the TV almost every week and see yet another Black person being killed by the police? You know what I mean? So I understand where she was coming from. But what I'll say to you and everyone out there, fear is a prison. Fear is a prison. Fear is a prison. I can't live my life in jail. You know what I mean? Am I careful about certain things? Yeah. But even, Tupac Shakur, who I knew very well when he was alive, I was in Vegas when he died, and I'm working on my next book, which is about Tupac. He said that there's no place called careful. It is what it is. I'm not reckless. I used to be much wilder, back in the day. But what I will say is I live a pretty fearless life. I'm going to do what I got to do out here. I can't live my life worrying about what might happen to me. I'm not doing anything that's irresponsible or disrespectful to people. I don't violate people, anything like that. But I just can't move around like worrying about what's going to happen every single minute of my life. I just can't live like that, because I think that's when we lose. We just give up before we even start trying, I mean, think about it. I said I didn't get on a plane till I was 24 years old, right? Part of it was because we were poor, but the other part of it is because I was scared, because I was told by people, the plane's going to crash. I'm like, word? Then I'm not getting on the plane. Guess what, y'all? There are more car accidents in the country and in the world than there ever. I mean, there are car accidents every single day. There are not plane crashes every single day. It's very rare that a plane actually crashes. But if you have fear put into you about flying, you'll start to believe every plane's going to go down. That's just not true. I can't live like that. I just can't live like that. And so, think about it like this. I was told, when I was growing up, these negative statistics about Black and Latinx people, especially Black and Latinx males, and the males out there, the Latinx males know what I'm talking about we're going to jail, we're going to end up in crime, all this kind of stuff. Well, if that's the case, how did I end up with 14, 15 books? How did I end up with my own business? How did I end up seeing this country extensively, seeing the world? Because I refused to submit to someone else's fear and their definitions. That's what I'm saying to y'all. I ain't with that. You know what I mean? I'm not with that. I'm not a slave. I'm not a sucker. I'm none of that stuff. I'm determined to be free on my own terms, and free of fear included in that.
Right. Any other questions? Anybody else have a question for Kevin?
You almost said Mr. Powell again.
I was
Ha
about
ha.
to say it again. I know. You heard me, you heard me. All right.
Can I say something, Ms. Lugo?
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and turn the camera on for a second, because I know.
Hey,
Hey there. Hi, Kevin.
I think we should give Ms. Lugo a round of applause for putting this together, first and foremost. Because I mean, real talk, you know, and Miss Lugo and I are going to stay in touch because she's dope. And it's like when I meet someone as smart as her, muy inteligente, muy inteligente. You know what I'm saying? I want to be connected to folks that are leaders like her. I just need to say that, you know what I mean? And just thank you from the bottom of my heart. I hope one day I can get there in person. That's really important to me to get back on the road like this, you know, and just thank you all. And I believe in all of you. I really do. I believe in all of you. And don't let anything stop you from doing anything you want with your life. Seriously. All right.
I'm gonna
I
turn the
love
camera
all of
back
y'all.
around. I'm gonna turn the camera back around. Let me say though, I'd love to have you on campus in the future. Thank you, Kevin, for coming over and working together. Let me turn it around so you can say, you know, your goodbyes to everybody.
Peace
Okay.
to y'all. Peace
Thanks
to
very
y'all. Thank
much,
y'all.
Kevin.
Buena suerte. Buena
A little bit
suerte.
of a round of applause, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. I wish you all well. Let's stay in touch. You got my Instagram, my Facebook, my emails on the chat. Hit me up.
All right, thank you, Kevin. We'll be in touch.
Have a good day.